Welcome to my Dungeons & Dragons video. This video is going to be made primarily for my players as a recap of the adventure that we've been playing for the past 7 months in the Faerie Tale Kingdom. The name of the campaign is The Land of Stories. And so this is going to be just a very casual sort of read-through of our adventure, which is going to lead up to the final chapter, which we're going to be playing in a couple weeks. That adventure is called Snow White and the 700 Dwarfs. So everything has been leading up to this moment, Snow White and the 700 Dwarfs. So Chapter 1, The Spooky Forest. The story opens on Elsa. And this is what I read to the players in the beginning of the game. This is from Elsa's perspective. You are sitting on the floor of your bedroom with your back against the door. You are scared and confused, but most of all, you are sad. Your sister is on the other side knocking, asking you to come out. She hasn't seen you in days, but you are afraid that you will hurt her, and you cannot tell her the reason why. Suddenly, you hear a strange noise coming from the wardrobe. At first, you think something heavy has fallen, a suitcase perhaps. But before you can check it, the wardrobe flies open, and a man appears. He is bald with a long beard and robe, and he looks to be in a foul mood. He turns to you with a furrowed brow, a long stick extending from his fingertips. He is pointing it at you, rather threateningly, but you don't know what it could be. You there! Where am I? He snatches you by the wrist, so hard that it hurts, and pulls you closer. At once you feel your insides turn to knots, and the room begins to spin, the colors blurring into an abstract smear. You are now standing in a dark place, the only light emanating from the stranger's stick. The ground at your feet is coarse. The walls are shapeless and rocky. The air is wet. I have been here many times, but can go no further. Here, do you see it? The angry man directs your gaze. There is a circle deep in the ground, a hatch with writing on it. 4 other circles surrounded, all with faces, bearded faces. Can you read it? What does it mean? You examine the writing on the hatch. It's been years since you've studied Dwarvish, but you manage to make out the words, hi-ho, sing we for and through we go. What does that mean? The man shouts, shaking you violently. His eyes have turned white, and he seems to be frothing at the mouth. I need to find the source. Do you understand me? It is here! The source is here! But with all my magic, I cannot get through this accursed door! Curse those dwarves! Shaking with fear, Elsa says nothing. Bah! You are useless! A schoolgirl sorcerer! There must be someone in this world with some real magic. He raises his stick and vanishes. You are left alone in the darkness, alone and shivering. And I should mention at this point that this is going to be a rather unusual story to listen to, because this is basically a patchwork of different things I've written for the adventure. So I'm going to have these little scripted moments, which are a little bit better written and with dialogue. And then there's going to be other moments where just very brief summaries of just things that happened in the campaign. I'm going to be going from second person to first person to third person. So really the format is going to be all over the place. In fact, I may have to edit a little bit as I go along. But again, this is just a very casual sort of thing I'm doing here. Not like the usual videos. So on with the story. The second part that is scripted is called Kalima's Dream. And that is the female dwarf character that is played by my wife. And these are dreams that she's been having for a long time, even before this adventure started. Even when we're in other worlds, Kalima had dreams like this. So, this is her dream. It's burned into your mind, that wrinkled brow, that mushrooming nose, the pillow of a beard you snuggle with at night. Mostly feelings remain, the emotions that stir when you conjure that face. It made you feel warm and secure and loved. It made you feel like nothing bad could ever happen. He is bent over, sweat running from his nose, his ears black with soot. His eyes glisten, working feverishly, but you can't see what he is doing. Something is blocking your view, a barrier of some kind, just below your eyes. And then you hear it, the awful noise that haunts your sleep every night, a terrible squeaking. It gets louder and louder, and you are crying desperately now. Why doesn't he hear you? Why, oh why, doesn't he stop what he is doing to get you? No, he can't, because he's too busy, because he has found something precious, something shiny. By the time he glances your way, you are moving. The face is getting smaller and smaller. You are afraid, your face awash in tears. He reaches, runs out to you, but it's too late. The shadows overtake him until there is darkness, only darkness. And that's her dream. So now, beginning with the official adventure, this is when the players started playing the game. Lilia, Rose, Kalima, and Sekhmet, those are my 4 players, go through the portal at Stonehenge. And that's from the previous campaign, which was set in the Harry Potter universe in England around the 14th century. So what they did is they had a final battle with Salazar Slytherin at Hogwarts. Slytherin tried to escape by apparating to Stonehenge, and then he used Lilia's magical key, which is a key that can open the door to any world, to open magical portals at Stonehenge, because, surprise, Stonehenge is actually a hub, a gate to go to different worlds. And he goes through one of those worlds, and the heroes followed him. And that was the Faerie Tale Kingdom, which we're playing in right now. So, the heroes arrive in the spooky forest in the Faerie Tale Kingdom, where they meet Elsa, Ariel, and Cracktalk. As they try and find their bearings, Cracktalk, played by Fonda, my nephew, makes the mistake of picking a fight with 3 trolls guarding a bridge instead of answering their riddle. And that's basically the way my nephew plays. You know, he's a barbarian, he's got an axe, and as soon as he sees any kind of enemy or monster, he's just like, attack! You know, he's not going to think of a clever way of getting around the obstacle. And of course, the problem here is that he didn't know how tough these trolls were because he's not that familiar with D&D. He wasn't that familiar with his characters. So these trolls really could have slaughtered the party in seconds, or it could have been an easy fight. He didn't know. And so, but his first instinct is just, you know, to fight everything, to kill everything, even though there was an option to get around that. But I guess he was playing within his character. Also, a little side note is Cracktalk, because this is the Faerie Tale Kingdom and he's a character from the Faerie Tale Kingdom, Cracktalk is actually supposed to be the woodsman from the Little Red Riding Hood story. So if you're familiar with that story, Little Red Riding Hood was a little girl in a red cloak, and she was traveling on her way to her grandmother's house through the woods when she met the Big Bad Wolf. And in the original fairy tale, the Big Bad Wolf devours the grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood, actually disguises herself as the grandmother. But in this story, slightly different, a little darker, the woodsman who comes along later to cut the wolf open, and the Little Red Riding Hood, the grandmother, sort of pop out of the wolf's stomach completely fine. In this story, the girl and the grandmother are devoured by the big bad wolf. The woodsman comes along, who is Little Red Riding Hood's father, sees a giant wolf, flies into a terrible rage, and kills the wolf to get revenge. And then he takes Little Red Riding Hood's cloak and he wears it kind of as a memory of her. And that's actually the source of his rage, is that red cloak. So if you're listening to this, Fonda, I doubt you are, but if you're listening to this, that's a little hint about something that might happen later in the game. So anyway, during the battle, Sekhmet loses consciousness, and Ariel, that's right, Ariel the Little Mermaid, is nearly drowned. What an irony. Kraktok calls upon a Cord, which is a magical fey creature he had met earlier, for help. The Cord makes a pact with him in return for destroying the trolls. They eventually find refuge in a small cottage with a lone dwarf. Dakis Dak Dolmir, one of the original 7, is the last of the dwarfs living in the spooky forest. He doesn't speak much, and he is always busy working on something called the Iron Dwarf. What could the Iron Dwarf be for? Okay, so moving on. We have Chapter 2, The Golden Maple. Later that night, Kraktok, Sekhmet, and Ariel, your scars are beginning to itch everywhere the trolls bit and clawed you. The skin is starting to bubble up, forming nasty, pus-filled blisters. Ariel seems to be in an even worse condition. You don't know if you'll be able to go out in this condition, but at least you can stay in the dwarf's cottage. You are thankful for Doc's hospitality, even if your legs stick out from the end of the bed. The following day, Ariel is looking terribly sick. She is pale and sweaty with fever, and blisters cover much of her body, festering under her neck where the troll tried to choke her. Elsa is fine but looks worried. Ariel reminds her of her sister. Her cold hands help to soothe the pain. "Troll fever," says Doc. "Only one cure for that. You've got to find some tree sap from the golden boughs, enough to fill 2 vials. They're the biggest trees in the forest. They've great big golden leaves like a maple tree. Hurry now, the girl ain't got much time." To save Kraktok and Ariel, Lilia, Rose, and Kalima go in search of the golden maple. And by the way, one of the reasons that I did the story like this is I always have to come up with in-game story explanations for why certain players couldn't be there. And so I try to work it into the story every time. So in that particular game, my nephew wasn't able to show up, and so I had to explain why not. And I figured, well, since he fought those trolls, maybe he got some sort of sickness from them, which kind of makes sense if you consider trolls are sort of these diseased, blistery, disgusting kind of creatures that if they did claw and bite you, you probably would get sick. And I also want to make it so that everything that happens in the game has direct consequences. So it's not like a video game where you can just go back and restart the level and try again. In Dungeons & Dragons, you do something, it has an effect. And so Kraktok, he really suffered because he got sick. Also, Ariel, who was played by my niece, also couldn't be there. So those are the characters that got sick. So they went in search of the golden maple, and they ran across Alabaster, Snow White's daughter, along the way. They later find a life-sized gingerbread house, which turns out to be a decrepit shack under a powerful illusion. The old woman living there uses illusory treats to lure children inside so that she can eat them. But I guess the players didn't quite get the hint how evil this woman is and that she was eating kids. They just knew she was a witch. So they didn't try to kill her. Now, if Cracktuck had been there, I think he definitely would have killed the witch. And that would have been a good moment for him to fly into a barbaric rage and kill someone, because the witch really deserved it. The trolls not so much. But he wasn't there, so basically the other characters, the other players, they just let the witch live. So the only thing they did is Sekhmet, being classic rogue, snuck into her house and stole some of her stuff, including the witch's tiara. But they left the witch alive. Later that day, the heroes battle a Trent, a scary tree with a face, to steal its sap to save Ariel and Cracktuck's life. Kalima is taken by surprise and pummeled within 9 hit points, as Sekhmet keeps sneaking around to stab it, and Leah Grayton blasts it with a fireball. Finally, Alabaster shoots it with an arrow and it starts to bleed sap. Dragon Rose then climbs up its back, holding on to the arrow for support. Only problem, she doesn't have an item to collect the sap. Seeing this, Sekhmet calls to Evermore, Rose's pet dragon. The dragon flies around the tree, dodging branches to deliver a vial. The sap is collected, Rose jumps down, and by morning they all find that the scary-looking tree was just a big maple. Not scary at all. So this is basically something that I changed. If you look at the monster manual, Trents are actually good creatures or good aligned. They're not dangerous. But if you watch a Snow White movie, Snow White gets really scared by the trees in the forest. So, and I've seen a lot of fantasy movies where there's these scary dark trees, and it didn't make sense to me why in the monster manual there is no evil tree. It's only just good trees, good tree characters. So in this world, in the Faerie Tale Kingdom world, at night, because it's dark and shadowy, these trees actually become evil, and then in the daytime, the trees are good, or not even alive. And so all they had to do is really wait until day, but they didn't. So they didn't know that. Chapter 3, The Enchanted Glade. Sekhmet vanishes during the night from the dwarf's cottage. All the while, Doc, played by Zach, he's a friend of my older nephew Arthur, leads the party of Leah, Grayton, Rose, Kalima, Ariel, Elsa, Alabaster, and Cracktuck through the spooky forest. And this is interesting because in this campaign, we had every other player except for Sekhmet. She's the only one that couldn't be there. So then I had to explain why wasn't Sekhmet there. And again, I came up with an in-game story for why that would be she wouldn't be there. And it actually turned out really good. It turned into a good little adventure. Alabaster befriends some rabbits, asking their help to navigate out of the woods after Cracktuck loses his axe in an attempt to kill them. Leaving the forest, Kalima and Cracktuck kill a brown bear, which they cook and eat, and afterward they reach the enchanted glade. The glade does not allow Cracktuck to enter, sensing his propensity for violence. And this is when my nephew really went berserk, like in real life. He got really, really mad because all the players wanted to go to the enchanted glade because this was, if you look at the map, there's this little green area, this little green circle, basically, that's kind of along the road to Palace Town, which is where they're supposed to be going, which is where Snow White lives. And that's what I kind of expected everyone to do. But when they saw the green forest, they said, oh no, we have to go check that out. And I was kind of, as a DM, I was like, come on guys, how about you just kind of save that for later? And they're like, nope, we got to go check this out. And the problem is that I had written in the story months before that this was a magical forest that was protected by the magic of unicorns, because it's a unicorn forest. And so basically no characters that were not good aligned were able to go in. And if Sekhmet had been there, because she's actually lawful evil, there's a big story behind that, she wouldn't have been able to go into the forest either, but she wasn't there, so she didn't mind. But, you know, basically my nephew really wanted to play, and he was very upset that he couldn't get in, and basically he was kind of prevented from playing for a long time, and so that became a problem. But, you know, these are just the unpredictable way that the game is, and I didn't want to change the story on the fly, because there was a whole reason why this forest did not prevent evil from entering, which we'll get to. So in the glade, they meet 3 unicorns. Rose manages to earn their trust, and they confide in her that a big hairy creature comes in the night to hunt them. That night, an ogre nearly kills Cracktuck in his sleep. So I tried to get Cracktuck in there. There was an ogre that was passing by outside of the glade, but he couldn't kill it on his own, so he almost died. Using a necklace of unicorn horns, the ogre penetrates the glade's magic barrier. So even though the ogre's evil, what had happened is he had managed to capture a unicorn outside the glade and kind of used the horn's magic as a key to get through the evil barrier. Lilia Grayton creates an illusion to lure him toward an ambush, and Kalima finishes him off with her hammer, pulverizing his jawbone. Afterward, the unicorn tells Rose its secret name, Alkmaar, so that it may be summoned when called. And then at that point, my 2 kids fought for about 20 minutes over who this unicorn belongs to. Because technically, they had to roll charisma checks to see who would charm the unicorn. And it was my younger daughter, who plays Rose, who managed to technically get the unicorn to come over and talk to them. So my younger daughter was like, that unicorn should belong to me. But my older daughter, who plays Lilia, she said, well, that's not fair because you already have a pet. My younger daughter has the pet dragon Evermore. It's a brass dragon. So she says, well, you can't have a brass dragon and a unicorn, and I have nothing. And I thought that was reasonable, and I really wanted to give the unicorn to my older daughter. That's essentially why I kind of put the unicorn in there, because I knew that my older daughter loves unicorns. It's her favorite thing. She actually painted the unicorn that we use as a model, but, you know, my younger daughter did not want to give it up, and it was a huge emotional fight, and it was really just stopped the game. So, you know, this is the kind of stupid things that happen sometimes when you trying to play D&D. So finally, in Palestine, Doc meets with Bashful at his blacksmith's shop. They also find a dwarf named Tipsy in Tenkar's tavern. They convince Tipsy to help look for Grump if they can beat him in the game of Dragon Uno, which they do. Tipsy the dwarf then reveals himself to be Sneezy, admitting that Grump was probably out looking for his daughter, who disappeared over 20 years ago. I should probably mention at this point that the 7 dwarfs have all gone their separate ways, and that only 4 of them are still alive. Happy, Sleepy, and Dopey are dead. They actually find their graves earlier in the game. And Grump actually went to be to work as a guard in Snow White's castle, but then one day he mysteriously disappeared. And so a big part of this adventure is trying to find out, where did Grumpy go, and they need to find him. So on to chapter 4, which is called The Fairest One of All. Meanwhile, Sekhmet, you find yourself deep in the woods, and yet you don't know how you got there. The sky is gray, the trees lifeless, and a damp fog hangs over everything. You feel cold and wet and very afraid. Something tugs at you like an invisible hand, an icy hand. You reach a moss-covered shack deep in the bog. Much of the roof is torn, and it appears to be sinking in the muck. A haggard face greets you at the door. "Come in, my child. Come in." You recognize the hag immediately. She is hideous to look at, and yet she is welcoming. "I did not see it at first, the mark, but you have it. His mark is upon you." She touches your forehead with a knobby finger, causing you to convulse. "You have witnessed. Your eyes are open." Totally spellbound, you are powerless to move or speak. She leans into your ear, and her voice is like poison. "He is here." You follow the hag to the back of the shack, to a place enclosed by branches like a cocoon. There is a makeshift altar there, and you know sacrifices have been made here. You can almost hear the echoes of the tormented. "He does not ask much. Just a small token, really. A sign of your faith. An eye, a nose. Your finger, perhaps." She hands you a small knife. "Do it. When he is free, you will not regret it." Sekhmet is imprisoned and tortured by the green hag of the spooky forest. So what the hell is that all about? Well, basically, I needed to explain where Sekhmet was during Chapter 3. And the story idea was that this is the same hag that they had robbed, the one earlier that lived in a gingerbread house, where Sekhmet had snuck in and stolen her tiara. Now, the great thing about this is that I had not planned any of this to be part of the story. The players made certain decisions that I didn't expect. I really thought they were just going to go in and kill the witch. Like, look, all they needed to do is look in her pot and realize that there's the remains of children in that pot, and I think they would have killed her. But I think they just decided, well, she's an old lady, let's just leave her alone. And I didn't expect that to happen, so I had to say, okay, now what's going to happen? So because Sekhmet sort of robbed this witch, the witch comes together, lures her away by using illusions to lure her away. Sekhmet actually tries to find her pet Sphinx, which is named Bast. Bast had been lured away by an illusion, and then she was lured away by looking for Bast and ended up getting tortured by this evil witch. So I love it when these sort of unexpected story elements happen. It's, you know, the players and the dungeon master together should make the story, and this is a great example of that. Of that. And if you're listening out there, my Sekhmet player, I just want to mention that the witch refers to something called the mark, and you may have not really been aware what that was. And what that is that a couple games ago, even before we did the Harry Potter adventure, there was a wizard that they killed, an evil wizard, and they searched the chest and they found a scroll, and the scroll was written in the abyssal language, and my player actually had to translate the abyssal language into the common tongue. And because she had translated that text, her alignment actually changed to lawful evil. And so this is basically what the witch is referring to, is that she detects that evil that resides in Sekhmet's character and the knowledge that Sekhmet attained by learning how to read abyssal. So On with the story. As Cracktalk and Elsa kick it off in Tenkar's tavern, they might have had a moment outside the enchanted glade, the heroes explore Palace Town, eventually getting invited to the Queen's Ball after making some pretty dresses. Queen White is seated upon a throne, resembling the bright plumage of a peacock's tail, each feather inlaid with many colored jewels and semi-precious stones. Her court attendants are in flowing gowns of pink and blue, with tall conical hats topped by long, sinuous ribbons. The queen looks to have aged since the time of her fairy tale portrait, but she is still beautiful. "It's just awful," she says. "First this terrible darkness comes and goes. Then the ground shakes and the wall starts sinking. Then one day my captain of the guard, Grump, just gets up and leaves his post without leaving a note or anything. Such bad manners. But if that weren't enough, my daughter Alabaster goes looking for him, and now she hasn't returned either. Whatever could be the matter, I don't know. We've all been living happily since as long as I can remember. I tried asking Mirror, but he's gone all funny, scaring me so bad I hid him up in the attic. Snow White leads them to the attic where the magic mirror is hidden. They go to ask about earthquakes and Grump's strange disappearance. The magic mirror is at the top of a very tall flight of stairs. Dust and cobwebs cover everything. Old paintings, royal families having long passed, are completely obscured. Beds, chairs, and dinner tables of the finest workmanship are loosely stacked in corners. Candelabras, silverware, dishes. The ceiling is 30 feet above you, and the gears, sprockets, hands, and numbers of the back of the clock encompasses the entire wall. Opposite the clock face, hidden under a sheet, is a strange-looking mirror, its glass like dark water in the pitch of night. A single crack duplicates the queen's reflection. Two Snow Whites stare back at you now, as the queen undergoes a kind of trance. "Magic mirror on the wall, tell me, where has Grump gone?" "She is lost, my dear, as you soon will be," the reflection answers. "Why? Oh, why do you speak to me this way? Have I not been good to you?" "Indeed, you are good and kind and pure of heart. But as long as there is evil, the spirit of our Lord may live. Where great cruelty is met upon the pure, his seeds are planted deep in stone." The mirror reveals a shadowy reflection. The woman in the glass is a mockery, a sinister, twisted version of Snow White. She speaks with a demonic voice, and her eyes spill black with blood. And then the glass shatters, leaving a gaping darkness in the space that the mirror occupied. It is a darkness that envelops you, gripping your heart, drawing you into its mouth. It is at this point that Ariel and Snow White fail their saving throws and are sucked into what can best be described as a black hole. After that, the heroes meet Bast, who tells them that Sekhmet has been caught by the hag and is dying. Lilia, Graydon, and Kalima ride the unicorn Alkmaar to the hag's hut, where they do battle with a gingerbread clay golem. This is a clay golem that is actually made to look like a gingerbread man under an illusion. Since Kalima had been attending the ball, she forgets to put on her armor and must fight in a dress. Because of this, she's almost killed. But Lilia Graydon, with the help of Bast, manages to destroy the golem with a fireball. They are then attacked by a younger-looking witch, but the witch is beaten back before escaping into the woods. Sekhmet is rescued at last, but has been severely drained of blood. She looks about 30 years older now, and her constitution score is 9. Will she ever recover? Sekhmet, you are lying in a bed in Doc's cottage. Squirrels and bluebirds are curved into the headboard. At the other end, your legs hang over the edge, Bast curled between them. Slowly you find the strength to sit up, but you are terribly weak. drained of life. Doc places a damp cloth over your head and shakes his head. It's the evil eye. The witch hexed you. Looks like she stole 10, maybe 20 years from your life. That's how she stays young, you see. No way to lift the hex that I know of. He looks sorry for you. No way except maybe cutting her eye out. But that means you'd have to go out and find her again. And who'd want to go looking for that witch? Uh-oh, more bad news. When you look at the dresser, you find your crossbow, but your basilisk daggers are nowhere to be seen. And that's another interesting tidbit. When we played the Harry Potter adventure, the party actually fought the basilisk, which we saw in and also read about in the second Harry Potter book, The Chamber of Secrets. So they actually killed the basilisk and took its teeth. And just like how in the last Harry Potter movie, and even in the second one, the basilisk daggers, or the basilisk teeth, had the power to kill Horcruxes. Sekhmet actually took its teeth and turned them into daggers. So those were enchanted daggers that the witch stole. So, moving on. Unable to find the green hag, the heroes journey with Sneezy into the abandoned diamond mine, where they kill monsters, narrowly avoid hazardous rockfalls, and gather materials for the Iron Dwarf. They at last come to a rock impeding passage to the lower levels. The rock turns alive, leaving a hole, and the heroes are forced to destroy it. Amid the rubble, Kalima finds a talking axe. The axe calls her by the name Fiora. They cannot descend further as their rope is too short to reach the bottom. Now this is another of Kalima's nightmares, which were sort of triggered by the things she saw in the mine. For some reason, these images have been haunting you. Since you entered the mine, your dreams have become more intense, more vivid, and you are beginning to suspect that they may be more than just dreams. It would explain your fear in the mine and your sense of déjà vu. An awful reality is dawning upon you, realizing that you've been in that place before, when you were younger, too young to form concrete memories. That awful squeaking noise from your nightmares, the sound that wakes you in the middle of the night, is the turning of iron wheels inside an iron groove. The dwarf's cart did more than carry ore and diamonds. It also carried you. This was your crib. Chapter 6. There's no place like home. Crack Talk, my nephew, finally comes back to play. You've been drinking your sorrows away for weeks now, forgetting all about your deadly encounter with the bridge trolls, along with your newfound friends. Even Elsa, who seemed to have taken a liking to you at first, has run off in a huff. As always, your mind returns to wolves and to the loss of Little Red. You feel a gush of cold and a few stray flecks come in through the doorway as Joe the farmer stumbles into the tavern, a look of horror on his face. "Torn to pieces," you hear him mumble. "Never seen anything like it. My cows, my pigs, torn to pieces." Crack Talk, I think it's time to grab your axe. The town crier, "Hear ye, hear ye! Strange things are happening in the Faerie Tale Kingdom. The queen, her daughter, and the captain of the guard have all gone missing. If you should have any knowledge as to their whereabouts, come forth to the palace gates post-haste. What's more, rumors have been spreading from all throughout the land that once tame animals are becoming aggressive. Rabbits, deer, and even songbirds have been attacking people. If you or anyone you know should see something peculiar, do not hesitate to report it to the palace at once. Please note All reports are to be directed to His Eminence, Steward to the Throne in the Queen's absence, the Duke Ferdinand de Havilland. And for your own safety, it is strongly advised that no person shall be seen out and about after dark. Good day to you all and good luck. A knock at the door, a gathering of dwarfs. Days after you return from the diamond mine, there's a knock at the door of the Doc's cottage. He opens it to find Bashful. He is joined by dozens of other dwarfs. They are pouring in from all directions, descending upon the tiny abode. Bashful unravels a large spool of parchment marked with designs for what looks like a kind of dwarven plate armor. You overhear them speaking in hushed tones at first, and then it grows into a heated argument. 3 others have joined in the debate. They go by Grumbly, Stumpy, and Lumpy. Stumpy is short even for a dwarf at just 3 feet tall. Lumpy's gut spills over the sides of his belt, which barely looks to hold up his pants. Grumbly has a worthy face and a shaggy walrus mustache. At some point, Grumbly shouts, "Green Mithril!" Doc shakes his head disapprovingly. Dozens more arrive. They are laying down tracks. A wagon appears pulled by enormous goats laden with wooden beams, canteens, lanterns, picks, and a mining cart. Then you see it. Bashful's cart covered by a tarp. When the wind blows, you catch a glimpse of something shiny. It looks like a glove. A tremendous glove, bigger than a dwarf. As Sekhmet stays behind to help the dwarfs, Kraktak joins Lilia Rose and Kalima to discover the secret gnome village, Nowhere Special. There they meet April, a young female gnome. They also buy beans from a magic store. That's kind of important, players, if you're listening. And find clues as to the whereabouts of the big bad wolf. Jumping into a magic pool, the heroes end up in the spooky forest, where Kraktak confronts and kills the giant wolf, but not before April is horrifically devoured. Doc, Bashnar, and Achaeus Chu, that's Sneezy's real name, stand at the entrance to the diamond mine after a hard snowfall. They have been busy for the past 2 months, along with dozens of other dwarfs, carting mithril out of the mine to Bashnar's shop in Palestine. It appears that their designs for the Iron Dwarf have changed. With the mine cleared of monsters, they are building something much bigger. Having purchased winter coats and Nowhere Special, Lilia Rose, Kalima, and Sekhmet journey into the snowy, forbidden mountains, where they kill a yeti and free a young girl who had been frozen in a block of ice. The girl leads them to a hut, which has been made via illusion to look like a ruin. The 2 witches living inside had been preparing to dine on her younger brother. After a prolonged fight, the heroes destroy the witch's ice elemental and the ice hag who summoned it. Sekhmet also frees herself of the curse by slaying the witch's sister, the Green Hag. So the Green Hag is finally found and killed. Chapter 8. Enter the Sunless Citadel. Kraktak arrives in time to stop the 3rd hag, sister, from throwing Sekhmet from a cliff. He then joins the party as they journey down into the Forbidden Fortress, where they find Grumpy. And just to let you know, Sekhmet actually woke up and she was in her sleeping bag to see that Kalima was dragging her through the snow to throw her off the cliff. And again, you know, these witches, they love to use illusions. That's their primary thing. So my player didn't quite know what to do. Should she attack Kalima? But it turned out that Kalima wasn't Kalima. She was actually the 3rd witch in disguise. But Sekhmet managed to free herself from the sleeping bag. And then Kraktak showed up and helped to kill her. So good he showed up. But finally, they go through this dungeon, and they finally found Grumpy locked in a cell. And This is Grumpy's story. If you must know, this whole bleeding mess is my fault. And now you adults coming here are making things worse. Thanks a lot. It all started years ago, about 30-odd years, I reckon. I was in the mine digging up diamonds. Was no trick to getting rich quick. Then the missus went and had us a girl. One day she tells me to watch over the wee one, and so I does. Set her up all nice and neat in the cart with blankets and all. Made a bassinet out of it. No harm would come to the lass. I made sure of that. Then I go and spots it. Biggest blasted gem you ever did see. Wish I hadn't. I lay awake at night still wishing I'd never seen it. I was so busy digging it out that I didn't even hear her wailing, calling out to me. It was like some devil had me ears. When I finally looked, the cart was just gone. Just rolled away. I blew my horn, called every dwarf in the mine. We went looking. Couldn't find nothing. Not the cart, nothing. Cursed the day I ever laid eyes upon that gem. 10 long years I kept at it, even when the other dwarfs had quit. I couldn't. I wouldn't. Then I come to this well. It was like a door. I didn't know where it comes from, but I sensed it didn't belong. Not in the mine, not in this world. But I tore it open, certain I'd find her behind it. It was a long way down. So I called my brothers, we were 7, and we went down and down deeper into the ground than any dwarf had ever been. That's when I understood what I'd really found all them years ago. It hadn't been a gem. I'd not even bothered to dig it out after losing my girl. Didn't want it. But the gem, see, was just the tip of something bigger. A crystal the size of a house. No, 2 houses. And there was something moving inside that scared the pants off us. We went running, scared out of our wits. Things were chasing us. Can't tell you what. It was too dark. We weren't looking back. 7 went in and 4 came out. Don't be happy, sleepy, dead 'cause of me. So we sealed it up good. 20 years, and I thought the whole thing was over. Then I go and do something stupid again. They should really call me Stupid the Dwarf. This wizard comes to me with a long beard and everything. Says he needs to get through this dwarf seal. I tells him no way, no how. But he shows me this glass, and in it I sees my girl. She's alive, he says, and he can point me the way. All I has to do is tell him how to open it. And so I goes and tells him. Just like that. And he says, I'd meet my daughter here. Go to the Forbidden Castle and you'll see her. Knew her name and everything. Fiora. That's right. Kalima's real name is Fiora. And there was a clue of that too when Kalima found the axe in the dwarven mine, and the axe referred to her as Fiora. It was determined that was her real name, the name given to her by her actual father, who was Grumpy. So, chapter 9. This is the last chapter before the grand finale that we're going to play in a couple weeks. Chapter 9, Queen of the Underdark. Cracktalk retires for drinks at the Dragon's Flagon as the heroes continue to the Forbidden Fortress in search of Grumpy's godchild, Alabaster. Because remember, Alabaster had also gone looking for Grumpy. Along the way, they kill a young gray dragon. Then they get to the final room of the dungeon, or one of the final rooms. Dark violet clouds swirl above ancient crumbling columns, the ceiling they once supported long torn away. You can scarcely imagine how the place might have looked when it was built. A flight of steps leads to a dais, where a dark-robed woman draws your gaze. And in the center of it all, a solitary cage hangs from a chain. You recognize Alabaster at once, who has been forced to squat inside the cage. She does not look well. The dark-robed woman descends from the dais with an air of queenly grace. A raven sits atop her shoulder, and a decorative chalice swirls in her palm. Despite her sinister appearance, she is stunningly, disarmingly beautiful. Do you like my trophy? She is so innocent, so sickly sweet, like a single rose growing in a thorn bush. But she will learn life is misery. The years will strip away her illusions, and when all her faith and happily ever afters are gone, I will send her back to her mother, a new woman. And of course, this is Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty. Grumpy threatens Maleficent so that she releases Alabaster. That simpleton, that whimpering peasant girl, she didn't know enough to keep from eating a poisoned apple. And now she sits on the throne. That should be my throne. I'm more beautiful and more charming, am I not? Sekhmet tosses the scales of the young grey dragon onto the ground. In seeing this, Maleficent flies into a rage, revealing her true self, that of a black dragon. Of course, the young grey dragon was her child. The battle nearly takes the life of Sneezy and Rose. Kalima delivers the killing blow. As Maleficent is dying, she remarks, "There is something wrong in this world. You must have felt it. Where's your happily ever afters? This is not how the story ends, how it's supposed to end. And yet here we are. It's all been changed, don't you see? All the stories have been changed, and it's her fault." She points then dramatically to Lilia. "Yours and that key of yours. You've opened doors that should not have been opened. And now we are living in it, in the mess she's made." And of course, what is she referring to? It, in a rather cryptic way, Maleficent is referring to the overall story that encompasses all of our adventures through Greyhawk, through Hyrule from Zelda, from the Faerie Tale Kingdom and Harry Potter. Basically, it's like these worlds were separate, and through the power of Lilia's key, which can traverse worlds, she's sort of gone in and sort of interfered with the natural history of these places. So somehow Maleficent knows that. Who knows how she got that information, but I guess she's a very powerful black dragon, and she has access to knowledge that nobody else has. So basically, that's it. That's the end of our story. That's basically 7 months of playing, encompassing 9 different gaming sessions. And it's all going to conclude in 2 weeks. Chapter 10. I'm very excited about it. And when I get back, I'll add to the video and basically, tell the story of how it ended. So thanks for listening.